Great. Okay, so really quickly, my name is Yamile Molina. I'm the Associate Director for Community Outreach and Engagement at the University of Illinois Cancer Center. And I'm excited to co-lead this effort with Dr. Joseph Dufresne, who is one of our staff scientists and an amazing thought leader for us in the Community Engagement and Health Equity Space or Office or CHE office for the University of Illinois Cancer Center. So we're going to do a quick introduction to this fellowship opportunity, and then we are going to walk folks through the application process, and then we'll have questions. So I anticipate a lot of room or a lot of time for questions, and it'll be pretty straightforward. So I'm going to give you the floor, Dr. Dufresne, and I'm going to give you that slide right here.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Molina. We're so excited you guys are applying for this new opportunity. You know, we here at the Cancer Center, we're trying to innovate a new way of interacting with the community and promoting cancer research. You know, the traditional way that cancer research is done, a researcher initiates a study, procures funding, finishes the study, publishes the results, applies for patents, and then applies for another grant, and then the information that those results captured is disseminated through the process. It basically trickles down, for lack of a better way to say it. We're here at University of Illinois Cancer Center with Dr. Molina, like as she pointed out, being a sort of force in making and getting this step and bringing this into fruition. The concept that community and researchers, cancer research and community partners, and those who actually live here in Chicago are going to communicate with each other during the research process. So instead of it simply being a researcher starting their research independent of the community, we're going to have community come in, you guys coming in and interacting with the lab and helping the lab to understand what the community needs, what the kind of results the community is most interested in. At the same time, the researchers, our Cancer Center members, are going to learn from you guys and learn from your people. And they're going to learn how to A, not only do more relevant research, but B, also become more important members of the general of the national, at least the hope, right, of the national. I mean, you know, of caring for us, right? How do we get our scientists to understand more than just smart guys who sit in the lab and play with things, right? That they're actually doing things that extend lives, impact lives, and improve, you know, the lives we have for all of us here. So, you know, this is what we hope to do. You know, we plan to teach scientists how to talk to community members, how not to be intimidating, how not to throw big words at people, you know, and also, you know, we can't wait to talk to the community members to help them understand what the research process really is. You know, why is it sometimes it seems so slow, or why does it seem like we're not getting the results that the community wants? So again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all so much for applying, and we look forward to working with you guys in the future. Thank you, Dr. Moon.
Great, thank you, Dr. Dufresne. And thank you for those of you who are joining us. What I will also throw out there is if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Our amazing administrative support staff, Arthur Lewis, is here, and so he'll be able to direct questions as needed. And we'll have a Q&A at the very end. So just to build off of Dr. Dufresne's point, this is a fellowship that really signifies the investment that we have for community partners, where we are really recognizing the assets and the resilience and the existing efforts that are already ongoing in community by community leaders such as yourself in Cook County, as well as the Winnebago areas. And so the idea with this fellowship is really to recognize leadership and center all of the science really with community voice in mind. And the idea is truly to offer funding opportunities wherein community partners who already have strong existing programs, strong existing history of hosting events, can help us to bring together community members and scientists to talk through and think about what equity in lab science looks like and what that means. And so when I talk about lab science, I'm really talking about not clinical trials, but really our mechanistic understanding of what causes cancer to grow faster for some of us, what causes the worst and the poor outcomes, and what can we do to prevent it? What are the targets that we need to have in order to develop treatments and therapies that are really useful and benefit us all? So why are we focused in this? It's because we have for decades, as we all potentially know, had a disproportionate burden of cancer, which has been unjust, wherein communities that have been historically excluded from care, practice, and scientific innovation have been underserved and marginalized. And we at the University of Illinois Cancer Center really want to make sure that whatever scientific advances, whatever truths that we uncover in the context of cancer, thinking through the biology of it, is something wherein the community is at the table at the very beginning of that conversation. So community buy-in before there's a clinical trial, community buy-in before there is a therapy, to really make sure that we are all understanding what the state of the science is about what causes cancer to advance or to grow, and what can be used to prevent it. So with that in mind, this fellowship, I would strongly advocate, is a straightforward, very quick application. It's $20,000 across 2 years. And the real goal, as I said before, is making sure that we are providing compensation to community partners for the programs and the events that they are already doing. And the one thing that we're asking is adding scientists to the mix and facilitating those conversations between community and science in the ways that community leaders usually can and do as natural brokers of different people from different lenses and different ways of life. And so who can apply to this? Community-based organizations can, faith-based agencies or public agencies with a strong history of serving underserved communities are welcome to apply. And that's in Cook County as well as Winnebago County. So I want to just note the typo in there that there are 2 county areas that we are interested in for this funding opportunity. Universities and academic institutions are not eligible to apply. I will also throw out there that in terms of partners, there is no obligation, and actually it is not helpful for community applications to include academic partners. So I say that to note that this fellowship is going to be based off of the idea that community agencies are coming in with their wisdom around event planning and around programming to communities. The awardees of these fellowships will be paired with academics. So you do not have to have an academic in your application. We're going to find an academic and pair them with you. And I would strongly emphasize that as much as is possible. And I'm happy to take more questions about that later on. So here's the application process. And here we just want to note some pictures from a couple of the lab tours that really inspired this fellowship program that is led by Dr. Dufresne, again, who's a basic scientist, as well as somebody who's community driven. And so with this in mind, the question is, or excuse me, the application includes 10 questions. All are required to submit, and I'm going to go through each question in a minute. It's through a REDCap form, and I'm happy to provide the link if you do not have it, or ask Arthur to provide it in the chat. What you will notice here is there are some standard questions. For example, we would love to know the contact person for your organization and their email so that we can confirm that we've received the application and give notice of the status of the application. There is a Word file that is the instructions for the applications, which are mirrored in the application form itself. There is a budget instructions and template, which is the budget template that should be used and submitted. And so with that in mind, there are additional materials. One of them is 1 to 3 letters of support. What I'm going to emphasize again is that these are not letters of support from academics. These are potentially letters of support if you as a community agency work with other agencies or other partners, and you would like to work together as a coalition or as a group to host events wherein scientists may be able to connect and share and learn from communities. So those letters of support are optional. You are not required to have a partner, but you are allowed to have up to 3 partners for this fellowship. And then there's a budget and a budget justification. In terms of the point system or the awarding efforts, there's going to be a ranking system. It's going to go from 1, which is least impactful, to 5, which is most impactful. And the possible score is going to be 5 to 25 points. And each section, which I'll cover in a minute, notes how much weight each question has for the scores. And so the idea is the higher the score, the more competitive the application is. In terms of the questions, I'm going to now go through them one by one, and then I'll ask folks to provide questions or allow me to give any clarification that is helpful. So number 1, of course, provide your organization name in addition to the contact person's information. You'll then be asked to describe the organization's mission in 100 words or less. Then subsequently to summarize the organization's capacity to engage in health outreach for underserved populations, including yearly events and ongoing programs and workshops. So this summary essentially shows the capacity that the organization has to link scientists with community members for that bidirectional learning that Dr. Dufresne brought up. And so the idea is to really think through and talk about the yearly events, the ongoing programs that your agency and your partners, if applicable, are leading. And the idea is to also communicate the potential estimated number of attendees for each event or program. Again, with the idea being that you're showcasing to us how wide your reach is in the community already with the existing programming that you do. Next, we're going to ask you to describe any partnerships with other community organizations, clinics, and hospitals that would be leveraged for outreach and engagement about lab science. So the idea here is you have up to 200 words to communicate if you have other partners who will be helping you with the programming or with the event planning for those interactions, wherein you will help us to think through opportunities and ways in which science can be introduced to community members. Community members can provide advice and direction as to what the science and the direction of the science should be and go towards. And so, as I noted before, you are not required to have these partnerships. And if for the 200 words, you note that it is not applicable, that is completely fine. That said, if you have partnerships, if you are part of a coalition, and if you want to co-apply with up to 3 partners, this would be the space where you would tell us how you all work together and how you can coordinate to maximize that conversation that would be hopefully bidirectional again and continuous between community members and the scientists. The next question is to identify the staff who would participate in the project. So the idea is you have up to 500 words for this. And what we would like to know is for each person, what their training and their experience is in health outreach with underserved residents in Cook County. I'm going to note here that the idea is not that each individual is trained in talking about scientific projects or trained in research or trained to do scientific activities. The idea is really, how is each person on your team really involved in promoting health and wellness to populations that deserve it and have been historically excluded from that opportunity? How does your organization bridge that gap, address that gap in an aggressive way? And so please describe the number of hours that each of the staff would have available each week for the project. And this estimate should be reflected in the budget as well. And so here, essentially, you can think about it as a pre-budget justification wherein you're talking through and introducing your team and what everyone's experience and training is going to be and how much time they will be able to spend on this specific project a week. The next one is what we can consider to be the narrative or the approach. And so here what we're looking for is a couple of strategies that you think would be really helpful for lab scientists and research findings to be incorporated into the events in the program that you have from this year all the way through 2025. The idea here, again, is not necessarily that there are some already existing concrete scientific outreach events that are happening, but rather, how are you proposing to fold scientists, the new partners that you're going to be getting through this fellowship who are in the lab? How are you proposing to connect them into your everyday programming, into the outreach and the amazing impact that you have in communities? How are you bringing them to the table and really facilitating a conversation that allows people to understand the amazing science that is happening in our state? Now, as a note here for the strategies and as a minimum, there should be at least 2 events wherein scientists and research findings would be a part of community programming and events. And we want to highlight that it would be ideal to reach at least 50 individuals. Those 50 individuals would be hopefully attending the regularly scheduled events and programming that your community agency and that your partners already have in place. And so during these events, the idea is that communities can learn about local lab science that addresses community needs, that is really focused on cancer health equity. And then simultaneously, scientists should also be learning from local communities, including your staff and members, about what that science needs to look like to really address and prioritize what local communities want, need, and deserve. In terms of the next questions, there is a 500-word limit. Please provide an estimated total number of community members who will be reached. Like that was said before, the goal is at a minimum 50. There would be proposed, it would be helpful to have some information about demographics. This does not have to be exact, and we're not going to be asking for a reporting table where we tie you to a specific percentage, but if you can give us a general idea as to roughly who the community members are that attend your regularly scheduled events and programs and where they come from, that would be helpful for us. Finally, we will ask that you indicate whether you are a vendor for UIC. This part is pragmatic, essentially for the awardees of these applications. We will need you to be a vendor. So either you are a vendor and we can start the transfer of funds promptly, or we will need a little bit of wait time to establish you as vendors for the system. And so with that in mind, because we don't want to delay anything, if you are not a UIC vendor, once you submit your application, we will ask that you become a vendor as part of the review process. The benefits here is that by becoming a vendor for UIC, you are not only making it possible for you to acquire funds through this funding mechanism, but through other contracts and service agreements that we might have in the future with the Cancer Center, but also with other units at UIC. So note here again, in terms of the additional materials, but on the questions, there are up to 3 letters of support that can be applied. Again, noting that you are not required to have a partner on the application. If you choose to have a partner, these should again be community partners, individuals and groups that are working with you on your existing programming and events. And the real focus is not to have academic partners because we will be pairing you with the scientists. In terms of the budget, we are providing the template. I'm happy to answer any questions around the budget template and the like. I'll note that about 10% of the 20,000 that are spread across the 2 years can be allotted to indirect or operational costs. In terms of budgets and what is allowable, supplies are allowable, salary benefits, staff salaries, including fringe benefits are allowed. Rental of space for events is allowed, as well as consulting fees, for example, with the different partners that are in the application. Travel is as well compensated, and we have the travel rate embedded into the budget template. What's not allowable is equipment, such as computers, maintenance and service contracts for building modifications or anything of that nature, rental of office or lab space, if that rental is not involved with a community event or community program. Recruiting and relocation expenses are not allowed. And then, as mentioned before, no construction, renovation, or maintenance of buildings. In terms of the timeline, the applications are now open, hopefully through this, and I'm excited to take some questions. I do see some in the chat. So folks can apply at any given point. Applications will be due by 11:59 p.m. on April 28th in roughly 2 weeks. We will be having a very quick review process. So we will notify awardees by June 1st. And the notion will be for the 20,000, there will be $10,000 that are awarded for the first year, and then 10,000 for the second year, depending on progress reports and the like. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask anybody if folks have questions, and I will actually start with the questions that are in the chat, as is helpful. So if you do not have other partnerships, does this hinder or negatively impact your score? It does not hinder or negatively impact your score. So community agencies and partnerships are completely voluntary. You are not required to have them as is needed. I'm 99% certain that Equal Hope is a vendor. I believe that is true as well. And then the application link is provided there. So is this one award of $20,000 or multiple of 20,000 or multiple summing to 20,000? So there will be 2 awardees who will each be given $20,000 across 2 years. So it will sum up to 20,000. The first 10,000 will be for the first year, and then the second 10,000 for the year afterward. Other thoughts or questions?
Yes, I have a question. I'm Regina Hopkins, Advocates for Community Wellness. Could you please clarify the reach? You stated that there should be at least 2 events reaching a minimum of 50 participants. So does that mean for each year, there should be 2 events for that reach, or are we expected to have multiple events throughout the year to reach, multiple people?
That's a great question. So I would say there is a minimum of 2 events across the entire fellowship process, and they should amount to at least 50 individuals that are present. So not 2 events per year, but 2 events across those 2 years, or between 2023 and 2025. And then the total sum would be 50 across those 2 events as a minimum.
So for the remaining part of the year, so say, for example, if there's 1 event each year, what other activities are expected of the grantees to be doing throughout the year if it's just 1 event that's expected for that entire year?
Thank you so much. That's a really great question. So in addition to event planning, we do, awardees will be asked to participate in regular meetings with the scientists who are paired with them to kind of get involved in event planning, to get to know each other, and hopefully develop those real meaningful partnerships that would inspire not only the events that are covered through this project, but potentially future projects and grant applications together. In terms of regular meeting, we will have a curriculum. Part of this is so that our community partners get some exposure and some skills training in terms of what lab science means. What are we talking about when we talk about the bench? What are we talking about when we talk about molecules? And then simultaneously, scientists are going to be getting training in terms of what does community engagement look like? What does in-reach and outreach look like for that, and how to have a really helpful and meaningful conversation. So the idea is that those regular meetings really fosters a long-lasting partnership that we will, and again, we'll do the matchmaking, if you will, but we will also ask that folks participate in regular meetings, probably at a quarterly basis. I would say for the most part, we might ask that partners meet on a more frequent basis during the times of the events, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Let me know, Ms. Regina, if that answers your questions, or if I can give any further clarification.
That does. I'm just thinking about the budget of, say, for example, if I'm looking at the budget and I'm, planning a salary, percentage of time for staff members, for each year. I'm just curious, what would be accounted for on a weekly basis? What additional activities would be conducted during the week to account for those hours if it's, just planning for, 1 event per year?
Absolutely. I would say in terms of weekly basis, what we would potentially assume is that staff members' time spent on reviewing some of the readings that we might have for the regular meetings that we would have with the scientists might take place. Also, any follow-up activities that might happen in terms of event planning through engaging a new partner or engaging a new partner, especially partners who are probably going to be relatively new to community engagement. So I think for us, the idea is to provide significant compensation for the fact that partnership building takes time, and we recognize that and we value your time. And so thinking through what are the best strategies to make sure that staff have not only compensation for attending the meetings, but any sort of preparation for those meetings, including providing, doing readings right around the lab science, like I mentioned before, if that's a request, or doing any sort of follow-up or action items that were discussed during the meetings themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if while others think maybe through additional questions that they might have, I will just throw out there because I know that we skipped very quickly through it. So when talking about scientists, I just wanted to reiterate that the pairing is going to be really with lab scientists. So a lot of times we have growing partnerships between community and academics in terms of public health or population health. The idea here is that we are trying to build a fellowship and trying to build partnerships with individuals who have the lab coats like Dr. Dufresne has ready to go at any points in time. And that, to your point, Mr. Gina, might be another way in which people's time might be spent, and I would say would be proposed. So for example, getting a tour of the lab space at UIC or UI Rockford would be a reasonable place to just get to know each other, get to see what the equipment looks like, and just having that opportunity to understand what experiments are, if there are animal models, getting to know what that looks like, and having some firsthand experience and exposure to that type of science.
Thank you.
Hi, one question. So following up on that comment, I mean, I think it's really fascinating, right? Go into the lab, understand the details and the exact work that's being done by the new scientist partner. But then we loop back to, you want this to fit into existing events. So, is it really just kind of existing thematic events where, we might have been talking about new science and now we're going to plug in our scientist partner. So we didn't need to be planning something that is very specific to the scientist with whom we'll be partnered. It would just be a general type of program that could logically incorporate a lab scientist.
Thank you, Ms. Kate. That's a great question and a fundamental one. So, and I'll tell you, this speaks to our experience over the last 2 years, where we've had these events that are lab tours or smaller organizational settings, wherein we have made the focus engaging the lab scientist and having a conversation with the lab scientist. And as we all know, this type of programming involves a special amounts of recruitment effort, a special numbers of invitations and things like that. And so what we're hoping this fellowship really does is set up and start up a partnership wherein lab scientists become a part of the norm. And if that norm, right, is an annual health fair that folks have for their community area, that's an appropriate space to be, and lab science is one part of the multiple resources that are at that health fair, for example. And in that case, really, the lab scientists are learning and really fully immersed in what community assets and community resources look like and what that sharing in that space is like. I think if, for example, a partner has, or an applicant who applies has regular support groups or has group sessions, it's also that time wherein we enable lab scientists to become a part of that programming, maybe coming to 1 or 2 of the sessions, but to your point, Ms. Kate, really thinking about it in terms of how that fits into the larger mission of that existing group or that established group. How do we make lab science a part of that continuous conversation that we have in community programming with our clients and with our patients? other thoughts, just while we're waiting for questions or things to come up through? In the context of organizations that serve communities who are predominantly non-English speaking, I want to throw out there that there is a capacity to apply and to talk about engaging, for example, Spanish speaking or Arabic speaking populations and communities. The ask is for those regular meetings with scientific partners to have staff who are bilingual and bicultural and could provide that meaningful partnerships and the like. But for example, in terms of costs and things like that, if there is a need for interpretation or for translation to be a part of those events and ways and innovations for communities that don't usually have access because of language barriers to get that access, that is of course welcome and appropriate as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question in the chat that you might have want to respond to.
Thank you.
Ariel.
And this is from Miss Ariel. So what a great opportunity. I may have missed this as I joined a few minutes late, and I did too. What is the process in which community partners are paired with scientists? So concurrently right now, we have a parallel partnership opportunity for lab scientists who are cancer biologists at the University of Illinois Cancer Center. And so we have given to them as well a similar application that's very brief and very short, wherein we have asked them to essentially submit a scientific idea that they would like to explore over the next 2 years with a community partner, and then also talk through how engaging community will positively impact and benefit their science and their research. What we're going to essentially do is we're going to pick awardees from both of the mechanisms, and then we will pair them up based off of thematic or shared interests, right? As well as focus in terms of equity, whether that be priority populations or priority community areas. So that will be the process through there. I should also say in terms of the review panel, so who's reviewing the community grants, as well as the cancer biology grants, what we are intentionally doing is having our community advisory board through the University of Illinois Cancer Center participate in reviewing the applications in addition to leaders or scientific leaders from these lab sciences. Another question by Melissa: if community partners come across other questions as they fill out the application, is there a specific person they can direct their questions to? Yes, the answer is myself. So I will put this in the chat, and then it is also in the red cap form or the application form that is present there. And so folks are welcome to reach out to me. My email, just for folks who are watching this and not necessarily able to see the chat, is ymolin2@uic.edu. And my name is Yamile Molina. Well, thank you. I think the big takeaways I will promote out there over and over again is, number one, I want to just acknowledge that this is going to be our first time launching this grant mechanism. And as you can see from the passion of Dr. Dufresne and myself, the big push is that we want science to start with communities at the center of it. We want communities to be recognized for their wisdom and their intelligence and for what they know needs to happen in scientific settings. And so we're trying this out. We acknowledge there's lots of questions and openness, but the good thing about it being the first is that the field is wide open, if you will. We are also just really trying our hardest and our best to make sure that we are providing as much compensation as possible, because we recognize community effort and community time, and that building a partnership, and especially when there's matchmaking involved and you're paired with someone, that takes some time, that takes some labor, if you will. So compensating for that is part of the process and part of the budget that we fully expect will be involved in there. And then finally, just noting that the community events and programs that you all are already leading in your respective communities and for your respective communities is something that we want to value and that we want to invest in. So we're investing in a partnership with lab scientists. We're also investing in the infrastructure that already exists for communities that you all are spearheading and leading. And I just want to note that in particular. John, I saw you on mute.
I'm good. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Great. Well, it's quick. It's pretty straightforward, rapid turnaround, and we're really hopeful and really excited for you to apply and just to recognize you and excited to work with you in the future to have a legacy that's worthy of our communities in the future in terms of health and wellness. Thank you all.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Phyllis. I came in a little late. I accidentally cut myself off. I do have one question in regards to, working directly with the students, with the lab. Is there an opportunity? I know we're looking to host the events, within the community, but is anything available directly there on the site of where the students are?
Absolutely, Ms. Phyllis, that's an excellent question. So I think that in addition to regularly scheduled community events and programming, if the partnership, that is to say leaders such as yourself and the paired scientists, think that we should also have lab tours and events held at UIC wherein community members who don't usually have access to the labs get that access, that is 100% allowable, encouraged, and recommended, and that's definitely a positive piece. And travel and transportation to UIC, of course, would be an allowable expense for both the community members as well as the staff on your team.
I know for myself as being a part of Patient Brigade, I found it very interesting that one of the sessions that we had was a direct interaction with the students and in the lab, and it left a completely different kind of impact because we could see exactly how they were unfolding the information and the dialogue that we had. It just brought it all together that people really understood better when they walked away.
Absolutely, Ms. Phyllis. I think that we actually over the last year, we had a lab tour for prostate cancer as well as one for breast cancer. And we have one next week for breast cancer as well. And to your point, Ms. Phyllis, the community leaders and stakeholders were really impressed and excited about the science that was in their hands, if you will, and was visible. And then to throw that out there, and this kind of aligns with the idea of having community events, the subsequent events around prostate cancer outreach, again, regarding lab science and all that, we just had one actually in a church in the Southeast side a couple of weeks ago, and that was also exciting. And I would throw out there, as you think about approaches and strategies, what are non-PowerPoint ways that we can talk about lab science? And so I will throw out there, there are a good number of things that scientists do well. And I think there are a wide array of things that community leaders do well with a focus on communication, specifically for community leadership. So thinking through what are the creative, interesting, and dynamic ways that we can get fairly technical information across so that people can really understand it and access it and provide their input is definitely something that is a motivation here. We want communities to drive our science, and we mean that in every possible way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great. Well, with that in mind, I think we'll stay on until 5 o'clock for the UIC team. But for those of you who've had your questions asked and answered, feel free to have a beautiful Friday afternoon.
Yeah, do you have 1 minute if I hang here for a second? Oh,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you all.